All right, everybody, welcome back to episode 3 of the DIY bow build. In this episode, we're going to go ahead and tie in a couple Nock sets, and then we're going to do my D loop. And I'm going to do this kind of real time with you guys. So let's get a little closer and we'll get started. So what you might be able to see here is that I do have a little bit of serving material kind of just tied in. This is just one over knot on the top right here. And that was just to kind of hold my arrow level in here, okay? I do have my arrow level out here on the end, and right now I'm currently not zeroed out. But if I bump my arrow down just a touch, it ends up zeroing out, and then I have about 1 millimeter or 2 of space down here between my actual nock on my arrow and the first place I'm going to put my nock set. And the reason I'm going to do a little bit of space in there is to prevent that nock pinch. I do have a little bit longer of a draw at 30 inches, but my axle to axle on the bow is 34 inches. So I really shouldn't have too much nock pinch on the end down here. So I should be able to get away with just like a millimeter space down inside of there. So to start this, just to make sure everything is all level, so I do have my string level on the string over here. I did double check to make sure my center shot is still good. So all that stuff is squared away. And then my arrow is going to be completely level with that one extra little millimeter of space between that nocking point. All right, so just starting off, I started with about a 20-inch piece of serving material. And again, if you watch the first episode, this is that BCY D3 serving material. I'm gonna double check to make sure my arrow is nice and level. So my arrow is zeroed out, so I'm good there. And I can actually see that I actually need to pull this down just a little bit. So I'm gonna go down just a touch right there. And then I'm gonna actually add tension to my rest cable here so that it'll hold my arrow down out of the way. And that's where I'm gonna run my first nock set. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go over and under, and I'm gonna do it 6 times. So basically I'm gonna have a knot on this side, and then I'm gonna come back and have a knot on the back side, and then back and forth, front and back, front and back, front and back. Okay, now that I have my 6, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do this front one as a double knot, okay, so that it stays nice and tight on there. So there's no real chance of that coming loose, okay. Go ahead and get a nice little tension on there, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut these and burn them. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to release the tension on my rest again so that my arrow pops up. And then I'm going to re-nock my arrow. I'm going to put it all the way up against that first nock set. I'm just going to re-verify just to double check that it is at a good level still. After tying in that first nock set, I came back, put my arrow back in the rest, made sure my rest was in the up position. And then I can see that I am pretty dang level as far as the arrow being still centered in there. So good to go there. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and tie on the bottom nock set. And this is where I'm going to leave about 1 millimeter of space under there. So I'm going to go ahead and cut off another about 18 or 20 inches of this BCY 3D. Now I'm going to do the same thing that I did on the top, is I'm going to go an over or under or front and back about 6 times on this side as well. Then the same thing I did in the top, I'm going to do in the bottom is the last little knot. I'm going to go ahead and do a double knot. Pull that nice and tight so it doesn't come loose. And then I'm going to cut and tie, or excuse me, cut and burn. So like I talked about in the first video, I do have the 2 different D-loop materials. For now, I'm actually going to work with the Gibbs super loop rope. It's a lot more sturdy. It looks like it's going to be a lot harder to work with, but I'm going to try it out. I think I'm going to try this out first. So just based off of some things that I watched on YouTube and whatnot, I'm going to start with about a 5.5 inch piece of rope to start my D-loop. All right, so I'm starting with my Gibbs super rope for my D-loop. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm coming from the back side of the string. When I say the back side, this is the left-hand side of the bow. I'm going to make a little J with my material right here, and I'm coming from the left-hand side of the bow. And I'm going to put both of these tag ends through that loop that I just made. And I'm going to make sure that the knot, the end that I'm going to end up burning is going to be on the top, and the piece that I'm going to end up keeping as my actual parts of my D-loop is actually going to remain on the bottom, because I don't want it to cross over my knot on the top. Okay, I'm going to leave this extra end right here. I'm not going to mess with that really yet, because I'm going to come down here and I'm going to tie in my other side. Now for the other side, I'm going to go opposite of what I did on the top. On the top, I went from the left-hand side. From the bottom, I'm going to come from the right-hand side. So I'm going to come around. I'm going to come through my loop, my D-loop area right there. I'm going to come down, and then when I come back around, I'm going to go through the loop that I just made right here. And I will say that this Gibbs super rope is pretty stiff. It seems like it's pretty tough to work with. Okay, so basically there's the beginnings of my actual D-loop. So I'm just going to make sure I get this in the right position that I want it in. And then I also got to make sure that I have the right size D-loop. The correct size should be about a 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch. So it's actually a little bigger than I want right now. So that should be about right. So let me get this through here again. All right, that's looking much better. Let me get it below my Nock set right there. Get this one a little tighter. All right, so that's looking a lot better. Now what I need to do is I need to go ahead and I'm going to cut all this excess off of these 2 tabs, and then I'm going to burn this down and make my little ball ends on each of these. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to pull this through. Since I know that my lengths are right, I'm going to go ahead and pull this through and out of the way, so that when I do go to actually burn this, I don't burn the rest of my D-loop. All right, just to make it a little easier on burning out this D-loop so that I don't mess anything else up, I went ahead and just made my bow horizontal with this bow vise that's from a bicycle maintenance stand. I'll go ahead and flare all these out. got that one nice and good to go. So I can kind of pull that a little tighter. Okay, that pulled down nice and tight, so I'm good there. Now I'm going to go ahead and pull this one through. Okay, I just want to pull this one through. I'm going to flare it out, and then I'm going to burn it as well. And when you're doing this, you want to be careful that you don't get your actual D-loop. You want to get just these little knot ends. Flare that out. All right, I got my flares. I'm going to pull these by hand just a little bit, just to make sure I'm good. And then I'm going to get my pliers. And I'm going to come in here with my pliers, and I'm really going to torque this thing down. So now, as you can see, I got my D-loop on here. This may even be a tad extra long. It does look pretty long. But basically what this affords me, the reason I went with the top being the burn side on the top being to the right hand side of the bow and the burn side on the bottom being to the left hand side of the bow is it already creates a natural twist in the D-loop. All right, so you may or may not be able to see that, but there's already a natural twist in there. Because when I draw back, my D-loop is going to twist like this. Since it twists like this with my release, that adds an extra little safe haven in there so that I'm not putting any extra torque on my actual string. All right, guys, there it is. So my first ever time tying a D-loop and tying Nock Sets went easy. I'm actually really happy with the way that turned out. And it appears as if, like, so when I just pull on this and I just release it just a little bit, that it does look like there's no twist in my string or my D-loop. So I got it straight up and down in line with everything. So yeah, super happy with the way it turned out. That was actually kind of easy. I didn't think that was really all that hard at all. The biggest thing about it was I did have to watch some YouTube videos on how to actually tie a D-loop because I've never done it before. But I watched Mr. Dudley's videos from, like I said, I think they were like 5 or 6 years ago, a long time ago. But it still applied today. It was easy enough. So super happy with the way this turned out. I'm not 100% sure if this D-loop is too long or too short or anything like that. I'm gonna have to shoot it, but that's why I bought a couple feet of D-loop material so that I can actually get in here and mess around with this and see what happens. But I think we're ready to move on to our next video, guys. And our next video is actually going to be tying in my peep. I am going to have to enlist some help from my wife to get this done because I actually need to get on here, get my release on here and get an arrow. And I actually need to draw it back and anchor. And then I need her to kind of judge and see where my peep sight should be located on this string. So I'm going to enlist the help of her. She's going to help me out with that. We'll get the position of my peep sight, and then on the next episode we'll go ahead and tie that peep sight in. So appreciate you guys hanging out. Again, hit the subscribe, like, and notification button, and then don't forget, be a good predator.